This video is part 2 of the Gaza explosion video. If you really want to know how November 11th is known ahead of time, it is imperative that you watch this very important video and this explanation. And it is talking about these signs that began on October 17th and went through October 24th and November 7th, leading to November 28th. This is a very important video. All right, November 28th also ended up being a step in the trail of signs, and the trail of signs from November 28th led to January 7th, which also ended up being a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on February 3rd, specifically Shavat 24 in the Hebrew calendar, which begins at sunset on February 2nd and goes to sunset February 3rd. And this amazing video is the only place where you will hear the explanation for this trail of signs. And it will include the signs that occurred on November 28th and January 7th, as well as November 7th. It's all amazing. Make sure you listen to all of this amazing, profound video. All right, on October 24th, we received a number of amazing prophetic signs. This is a continuation of this story that God is communicating through the prophetic signs that occurred 7 days earlier on October 17th, and continue on, for that matter, on to November 7th, which will also be explained later in this video. And so I'm going to read this email in order to explain the amazing, profound prophetic signs that occurred on October 24th. This is the Gaza explosion video part 2. Make sure you watch part 1 before watching part 2 here. Both of these videos are absolute must-watch videos, especially if you are interested in the Lord's prophetic signs. But even if you aren't, there is important information, of course, in all of these videos, and including this one. So, the amazing signs on 10/24, October 24th. As we can see here, this email was composed on October 25th, 2023. All right. You can see here, October 25th. On October 22nd, 2023, Flight 2059 made an emergency landing after an off-duty pilot attempted to shut down the engines of an Alaska Airlines plane by flipping the fire extinguisher for the fuel lines. Joseph David Emerson is 44 years old, and he is being charged with attempted murder of 83 people. 83 is the 23rd prime number, making this a pairing of 44 and 23, which points to Obama. And by the way, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And one simple way in which he would provide a second witness for us, if we think about it, would be simply through pairing certain numbers together, such as 23 and 44. And I know this because I've been studying God's big picture of signs from morning until night, more than full-time hours, for more than 6 years. And the reason for 23 and 44 is simple. The 44th president, the basketball president, wore jersey 23 and will return to the White House when he in 2023. And this is only scratching the surface of the significance of these numbers and why God uses them in his signs, but it ultimately is all about identifying the Antichrist. All right. The flight was a Horizon Airlines flight, a subsidiary of Alaska Airlines. Horizon hints at the Obama-Biden 2008 campaign logo of a horizon and the red stripes of the American flag. I'm sure you can picture what I'm talking about, that famous logo with the horizon. The pilot was off duty, which hints at the former president currently who is off duty and in between presidential terms, Barack Obama. And that's one of the reasons why the number 23, by the way, is because the only president to serve non-consecutive terms, Grover Cleveland, skipped the 23rd presidency. That's just one of a number of other reasons for why the number 23. And this is why this pilot was off duty. It's symbolism for the current president that is off duty, Barack Obama, who was president and will be the president again, but currently is off duty. Emerson was in the quote-unquote jump seat behind the on-duty pilots. This hints at Obama's current role behind the scenes of the Biden administration. In other words, Obama is in the jump seat, if you will. Alaska Airlines hints at the 49th state. Alaska is the 49th state, and Alaska Airlines hints at that. And the 49th vice president, who will die in a plane crash, hence Alaska Airlines. That's amazing. And her crash is predicted to be the result of one of her engines being hit by a bird. Hence the engines potentially going out in this story because of the guy trying to flip the switch for that. She, Kamala Harris, will be 59 years old and 6 + 6 + 6 days old on the day of her death. Now, when this was written, it was thought that her death would be on November 7th. And God was indeed most for sure pointing to November 7th as being a step in the trail of signs leading to the predicted death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, which is now predicted to be on November 11th, 4 days after November 7th. And the signs, some of them on November 7th, confirmed the addition of the 2 + 2 days to November 11th. Okay? Well, anyway, this is why it was flight 2059. 59 hints at her age. Flight 2059 hints at 2 + 5 + 9 = 16. October 22nd, the day of this incident, is 16 days before her predicted death in a plane crash. All right? Actually, it is 20 days before her predicted plane crash, which is astounding, and I didn't realize this until now, because she will be 59, and it'll be 20 days after flight 2059. Wow. There we have it. She will have just turned 59 on November 11th, the date of her predicted crash, and it'll be 20 days. Let's see, is it? Let's make sure. Yes, it is 20 days. It'll be 20 days after flight 2059. That's amazing. That is clear. That is clear. God definitely was using 59 in this to point to how Kamala Harris, has just turned 59. And it will be 20 days later. And so we have 2059. Wow. Okay. So in any case, God was also pointing to November 7th, and 16 days is 4 times 4, which hints at the 44th president. And it pairs with Emerson's age, which is 44, and also the 83 people on board, the 23rd prime number. He was charged with attempted murder or something to that effect for the 83 people also. Okay, what is amazing is that in flight 2059, we also have a hint at 2 days and then 14 days, which is 5 + 9, okay? So in 2059, we have the 2 followed by a 0, so a space, and then a 14, because 5 + 9 = 14. 2 days after October 22nd was October 24th. The reason for this email explaining the prophetic signs that occurred on October 24th. And Harris's predicted crash 14 days later on November 7th. Okay, so this isn't just more confirmation that God was indeed pointing to November 7th, okay? This is how God's science works. I know it's a little bit complicated, but this is God we are talking about. He can do whatever he wants. It's up to us to figure it out. It really isn't complicated. I know someone who's brand new to this would expect a crystal ball, and for someone like myself to claim to be making a prediction to have it perfect the first time. But that's not how it works. It's a big picture of signs. It's like a puzzle, and the more pieces that are added, the clearer it gets. But God, how the big picture works is that in order to create the big picture, we have these interval steps, these dates that God points to, and then provides more information through the signs on those dates. And there have been maybe 200 or more of these dates over the last years that were known in advance that God was pointing to. And with an exception of a couple, they've all been 100% correct. And anyway, that's how he builds his big picture, is through establishing these steps, if you will, along the trail, if you will, of signs leading to the end prediction. In this case, Kamala Harris's plane crash. And so my point is that this is valid. Yes, her plane didn't crash on November 7th, but he was definitely pointing to November 7th in many different ways. And this is just one that I forgot about since I first wrote this email, but this is, one of the ways. And again, it's 2 days from October 22nd, from this sign that I'm talking about, to October 24th, which was another step. And then it's 14 days to the next step, which I believe at this point is the last step before the actual event. We will see what happens on November 11th. Maybe it's another step as well, because that's just how it works. All right. So now, so that's the end of that paragraph. Or no. Okay. On November 24th, Emerson was in court. Okay, so the 2 days later, he was in court. So we have a related event on 2 days later. And the charge documents were made public. The police report that Emerson admitted to taking psychedelic mushrooms 48 hours before the flight, which hints at the 48th president, and that he was sleep deprived and not in his right mind. Before he attempted to shut down the engines, he told the pilots, quote unquote, "I'm not well." He later told the flight attendants to cuff him or else it was going to be bad. He tried to pull the handle on the door of the plane to the exit of the plane. This sounds like a demon-possessed man. This is why the incident is 181 days before it is predicted that the zombie pandemic and mass demonic possession will begin on April 20th, 2024. 181 is the 42nd prime number, and in the Bible, in Bible prophecy, the number 42 is associated with the Antichrist. What further confirms, in other words, a second witness, to this 181 days connection is that on this same day, there was an incident at an airport in Houston, Texas, in which flights were halted after two planes clipped each other's wings, leaving debris on the runway. Houston, Texas, and so the airport was closed. Houston, Texas is in Simple English gematria, which if you don't know what gematria is, Hebrew, Roman, and Greek letters are also numbers, and as such, names and words can be converted into a numeric value. And when we do this with Simple English gematria, which is A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, Houston, Texas equals 181. And that is significant because Houston is Harris County. Harris County is essentially Houston, which of course hints at Kamala Harris, who is predicted to die in a plane crash. Hence, we have on this day in Harris County this date that was predicted ahead of time to be a step in the trail of signs leading to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on November 11th. We have on this day, October 24th, these two planes that clip each other's wings, shutting down the runway and the airport in Houston in Harris County. As well, after on this day, actor Richard Roundtree died on October 24th, and Richard Roundtree in simple English gematria also equals 181. R is the 18th letter, and the initials RR for Richard Roundtree also hint at 1818 and 181. He died at the age of 81, which also hints at 181. So Richard Roundtree with his initials RR give us 18 and 18, and he died at 81, which definitely is a hint at 181. Furthermore, his name, Richard Roundtree in simple English gematria, is 181. And he died on the day of this prophetic plane crash sign in Harris County, and Houston, Texas is 181. Richard Roundtree starred in the movie Shaft, an iconic movie that has been inducted into the National Registry, which is something of a big deal. Not many movies get inducted. I think it says something to the effect that it needs to be culturally, historically significant, etc., in American culture. And that's the case with the movie Shaft. It is the iconic first, I believe, or groundbreaking blaxploitation movie. I think that's what they call it, the blaxploitation movies of the, I guess, 1960s. Anyway, Richard Roundtree is like the iconic figure for that genre of movie. There was, what's his name? I'm forgetting his name now. The current modern day actor, Samuel L. Jackson. So Samuel L. Jackson, who has played roles, I guess, similar to this character that Richard Roundtree played in Shaft. In fact, I think the name of the character is John Shaft or something Shaft. And anyway, he said that this actor was his mentor or something to that effect, something like a figure that he looked up to. All right. So anyway, the point here in prophetically is that Shaft, the name, hints at a shaft of lightning. So the word shaft in English is used in context of a shaft of lightning. And lightning is Barak in Hebrew. Barack Obama's name in Hebrew. Okay, so let me just finish this sentence. Barak in Hebrew means lightning, and Harris's plane is predicted to be struck by lightning. Her crash will symbolize when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. The name Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barak means lightning. Bama means high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven. For example, it is said that Lucifer fell from the high place. And O, in the language Jesus would have spoken, is from. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us because he knew there would be a famous president named Barack Obama, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And when Kamala Harris falls from a high place, Bama, and crashes and is replaced with the Antichrist, it will symbolize when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven, especially if her plane crashes due to a lightning strike, which is also what I am predicting. And if it isn't due to a lightning strike, or if it's never known the real cause, it'll still symbolize when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. More confirmation of there being a second sign on October 24th in the Flight 2059 Emerson story, because the first part of this story was on October 22nd, and so there was a part 2 of this prophetic sign on the 24th, and more confirmation of this is that on October 24th, Tom Emmer was nominated for Speaker and then withdrew his candidacy 4 hours later after trumpet's criticism. Trump is God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs. Emmer hints at Emerson, the name of the pilot. Tom Emmer hints at the number 3. And the sign of Tom Emmer on October 24th pairs with 14 days to Harris's predicted crash, and gives us 314, the area code of St. Louis, where she is predicted to crash. And again, this 14 days to October 24th gets us to November 7th, which is a legitimate 100% correct connection. What I just read is valid because of the signs that occurred on November 7th that are leading to November 11th. And that's just how his signs works. That's how it works. It's a trail of signs, and he is fully entitled to make a connection that isn't the ultimate prediction, but is related to it. Like I'm explaining in this video here, these signs, these plain signs, the Emerson pilot, and also the planes that clipped each other in Harris County, they occurred on October 24th, and God was pointing to October 24th at a time as being the date related to Kamala Harris's predicted death in a plane crash, and it wasn't. But that doesn't mean that the connections to October 24th weren't valid, because we had the signs that confirmed all of the analysis and established that it was a step in a trail of signs. So anyway, I realize that people will be skeptical of that. Probably you aren't by this point in this video if you are still listening. But the point is also, if you are, fair enough. I completely understand you don't know where I'm coming from after knowing God's signs for 6 years. But this is the case, and it will be proven when the prediction finally happens. And that will prove everything that I'm saying about there being steps along the way, like I'm trying to explain here. All right, so we were establishing here that Tom Emmer is symbolism for the number 3, which I will explain. But the day of this Tom Emmer sign was 14 days before November 7th, which hints at 314, the area code of St. Louis. It is also a hint at Isaiah chapter 31:4, and it is also a hint at pi, which is another story. But essentially, the eclipse passed over St. Louis in 2017, and eclipses are calculated using pi, God's transcendental number that he has baked into his creation. Now, Tom Emmer was the 3rd representative to be nominated for Speaker of the House after McCarthy was ousted. Emmer was born on the date 3/3. Okay? So he was the 3rd to be nominated Speaker in the chaos, if you recall, a week or so ago, regarding the Speaker of the House nomination process. He was the 3rd one, and he was born on the date 3/3 in 1961, exactly 22 weeks before the birth of Obama, the Antichrist. And the number 22 is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, as I've explained many times. And Emmer represents the 32nd state. He's from Minnesota. And the 32nd prime number is 131, which hints at G131 in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word blood disease. Emmer represents the 6th district of Minnesota, and his being the 3rd nomination hints at 3 6s. Okay, which is 666, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Emmer is known for a controversy in which he wrote a fundraiser letter claiming 3 people had bought the Congress for the Democrats: Michael Bloomberg, Tom Steyer, and George Soros. He was accused of anti-Semitism, even though Steyer attends a Baptist church. But it was a big story, and it's related to Tom Emmer and who he is, what he's known for, and it's 3 people. Again, another confirmation that Tom Emmer symbolizes the number 3. This is a sign in which God is communicating that the Democrat Party is corrupt and bought. So, in other words, it works the other way around too. The fact that God is confirming the prophetic significance of Tom Emmer, and the number 3 confirms the prophetic significance of him naming 3 Democrats as being the as buying accusing them of buying Congress, makes it true. And of course that's true. I mean, everyone should know that. That's politics these days. And the Democrat Party, it is completely bought and paid for and completely corrupt through and through. 100% evil and corrupt. All of them. Emmer was also one of the 126 representatives to sign the amicus. And that's not to say that Republicans aren't either, but there's still life left. The Republican Party is still breathing. There's still some life left in the Republican Party, whereas the Democrat Party is completely bought and paid for. Emmer was one of only 126 representatives to sign the amicus brief in support of the Texas versus Pennsylvania lawsuit regarding the referendum. 126 hints at 1,260 days of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. A number of days regarding the period of the Antichrist mentioned 7 times in Bible prophecy, but it is only symbolism. We are well inside the 1,260 days. And make no mistake, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, the reason for this prediction from God is to prove this, that we are already well inside the 1,260 days. Case closed, end of debate, no more discussion. It is finished. We are definitely inside the 1,260 days when the prediction comes to pass. That's the purpose of the prediction. After Tom Emmer withdrew, Mike Johnson was made the 4th speaker nominee on this same October 24th date, this date that God was pointing to ahead of time. The initials MJ, as in Mike Johnson, equal 23 in simple English gematria, as does Michael Jackson, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, these prophetic figures that God has been using. And the reason is because Obama wore jersey 23 in high school. On this same day, LeBron James, at the basketball season opener, wore jersey 23 again. Oh, speaking of which, it was the 4th time he had changed his jersey number. Okay, so we have this 4th speaker nominee with the initials MJ, which equals 23 in God's signs. And on the same day, LeBron James, who famously wears jersey 23, changed back to 23 for the season opener for this season. And it was the 4th time. And Michael Johnson was the 4th nominee. Jersey 23 and 4th time hint at the 4th speaker nominee whose initials equal 23. James originally stopped wearing 23 the first time out of respect for Michael Jordan. So he began his career wearing jersey 23, and then he changed his mind, and out of respect for Michael Jordan, whose initials are MJ, which equals 23. The Antichrist wore jersey 23, Obama, and will be thrown into the lake of fire. James wears 23 and plays for the Lakers. The Lakers got their name when they played in the 32nd state. We already had the 32nd state come up in a prophetic sign on this day. And 32 is a reflection of 23. LeBron James changed his number from 6 to 23 out of respect for Bill Russell, who wore number 6. So he it's funny. He stopped wearing 23 out of respect for Michael Jordan, but now he's back to wearing 23 out of respect for Bill Russell. On the same day that LeBron James changed from 6 to 23, the representative for the 6th district in the 32nd state was changed for the rep with the initials MJ, which equals 23 and hints at Michael Jordan and his jersey number 23. That's amazing, all of this, right? Hope you're catching all of this. In Hebrew gematria, LeBron James equals 923. That is amazing. I forgot about that. Okay, because, well, let me see. Do I say it right here? Michael Jordan wore 23 and also number 9 for the Dream Team in the Olympics, in which he outscored their opponents by an average of 44 points. Well, so I'm writing to people that already know what I'm talking about. So a huge thing, very, very important in God's signs is him pairing these numbers together, like I was mentioning. But I shouldn't say especially, because that would diminish the pairing of other numbers, like 23 and 44, like I explained. But God pairs 9 and 23. It's huge. Pairings of 9 and 23. And that's why LeBron James equals 923. And as I just explained in the sentence following this, it relates to basketball. Furthermore, because Michael Jordan, for one thing, wore jersey 23, but he wore number 9 for the U.S. Olympic Dream Team, in which they outscored their opponents by an average of 44 points, which means that the 44th president, who became president in 2009, will return to the White House in 23, and when he played basketball, wore jersey 23. The rapture sign alluded to the rapture from the basketball president who wore jersey 23 and became president in 2009, and this sign occurred on the date 9/23. All right, now, if you don't know what the rapture is, that's described in Bible prophecy as being the moment when God's faithful will be rescued and spared the severe persecution from the Antichrist. The story of James's and the Lakers season opener, in other words, the news story, was how James only played for only 29 minutes, and how this would be the new norm for James as part of a strategy to overcome the new NBA rules regarding resting players. This hints at the strategy of Barack Obama to overcome the rules regarding being elected more than twice. He will claim to be in for a short period until the next election. Like the 38th president, Obama will be appointed instead of elected, and the Lakers lost to Denver's 119 points, which hints at 9/11, in the 38th state, Colorado, on October 24th. James needs rest because he is 38 years old. A second witness confirmation to the game being in the 38th state and the reason for his rest. And strategy being only in for a short period, which hints at the strategy for Obama to claim that he's only in for a short period until the next election. Because what is going to happen is that after Kamala Harris dies in a plane crash, Michelle Obama will be appointed the vice president, and then Joe Biden will step down, and then she, as the president, will make Barack Obama her vice president. The initial strategy will be to run for election in 2024, which is why Michelle Obama will be the president. Okay, so she will run in 2024. But in the meantime, Barack Obama can be made the vice president. That will all change next January when things change. Probably there'll be a realization that there won't be another election, but I also predict that the two will get divorced and Michelle will leave the White House and Barack Obama will have no choice but to become the president until the next election, but there won't be one anyway. And when he becomes the president again before the next election, he won't be able to run, but it won't matter by that point. Okay, so Matt Gaetz, the U.S. Congressman Matt Gaetz, is said to be responsible for the current quote-unquote chaos in Congress. Matt Gaetz's middle name is Lewis. He was born exactly 37 years before the three sets of seven sign in St. Louis. Okay, on May 7th, 2019, the St. Louis Blues won Game 7, which began at 7 p.m. in overtime with a goal from hometown hero player number 7. All right, so we need to explain a few things. First of all, the number 37 hints at 3 sets of 7. That is relevant because of the book of Joshua, when the Israelites marched around the security walls of Jericho in symbolic 3 sets of 7 before they collapsed in God's judgment. 37 years is also 444 months, which gives it a second witness because it hints at the 44th president. And the walls of security of America will be collapsing when the Antichrist becomes the president, the 44th president, becomes the president again. Now, on this May 7th date in 2019, let's see. Yeah, I mentioned it later, so I'm not going to mention it yet. So on this May 7th, 2019 date, which was the 37th birthday of Matt Gaetz, St. Louis won Game 7. This was the first playoff series win on their way to winning the Stanley Cup after having earlier in the year been in last place in the entire league. It was a rags to riches story. It was a phenomenal story. It made the fans in St. Louis go nuts. They were loving it, and on and on. But there's huge prophetic significance to all of this, which I believe that I'll probably get into a little bit in this paragraph, so I won't jump ahead. But the point is that on the 37th birthday of Matt Gaetz, okay, also, I don't know if I mentioned this either, but St. Louis is known for its Gateway Arch, the gateway to the west, which commemorates the expedition of Lewis and Clark. Oh, speaking of Lewis, you know what? I don't know if I've mentioned this in this paragraph because I don't remember. Right? So that would be why the middle name of Matt Gaetz is Lewis. Okay. It is hinting at St. Louis, but it's also Lewis and Clark. Okay, and that's St. Louis isn't named after Lewis in the Lewis and Clark expedition. But anyway, the point is that we had a 3 sets of 7 sign on this day, and this was 37 years after the birth of Matt Gaetz, and St. Louis is known for its gate. And in the Bible, judgment on a people symbolically begins at the gates, which is why God is pointing to the gate of St. Louis, and for that matter is why Kamala Harris's plane crash will be near the Gateway Arch. Okay, so anyway, we had this prophetic win of the St. Louis Blues, which, by the way, was against the Dallas Stars. And that's because the main theme of God's big picture of signs is judgment warning for the church, which is symbolized by Dallas, the American Evangelical Church of Laodicea, which God is very, very displeased with, which is why the end times are happening now. Okay? And you don't hear that very much in other from other people talking about God's signs, and that's one reason why God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is only being explained on this channel. The others will more or less cheerlead or present God as a cheerleader for the church, but it is not the case at all. God is very, very displeased with the church. And these signs are primarily judgment warning for the church, which is why we had this prophetic sign against Dallas, because Dallas in God's signs symbolizes the American Evangelical Church. For that matter, the location in which the heretical doctrines are taught that churn out the nation's pastors that preach for money, something Jesus forbid. And he also forbid having authorities in the church and leaders, etc. Okay? But this will all be explained more in the 23 church signs video. If you are a Christian, make sure you watch that video. And I really don't know what you are thinking if you don't watch it after the prediction comes to pass. It's the most important video. All right. So This game, in which there was a 3 sets of 7 with the hometown, because the player that scored the winning goal in overtime of Game 7, he is from St. Louis. That's amazing too. This was 7 days before the anniversary of Israel's rebirth in 1948, and Lewis and Clark set out from St. Louis exactly 144 years before the rebirth of Israel. In the Bible, 144 is symbolic of Israel. Well, it's in the book of Revelation, and it's 12 times 12. And well, let's just leave it at that. I got to continue. The St. Louis Blues are colloquially known as the Blues and Whites, the Blue and Whites, as are things made in Israel. And the Blues were one of 6 expansion teams in 1967, the year that Israel expanded its territory in the 6-Day War, which is why 66 days before the 3 sets of 7 sign in St. Louis was the day that the 144-year-old fig tree collapsed in the historic plaza in downtown Los Angeles. Lewis and Clark were looking for a passage to the West Coast. The Pilgrims took 66 days to cross the Atlantic and anchored off of Cape Cod. 144,000 days, which is the number from the book of Revelation that I just mentioned, which is why the 144-year-old fig tree. Okay, so they anchored, they took 66 days to cross the Atlantic and anchored 144,000 days before the path of the 2015 eclipse passed over the Atlantic that hinted at the crossing of the Pilgrims. Just briefly, this eclipse was on the spring equinox, which is the day in the year in which day and night is evenly split, and it was also the first day of the calendar year in the Hebrew calendar, so it split the calendar. Well, actually, because there's 2 calendars in the Hebrew calendars. There's the civil and the religious. And it split the civil calendar, okay? So it split it. And also, it split the blood moon tetrad. The eclipse occurred in the middle of the 4 blood moons, if you know what I'm talking about. And anyway, that was all symbolism for the prophetic significance of the eclipse, which its path split, an uncanny splitting of the old world from the new world. If you look at the map of the path of this eclipse, you can see that it's clearly delineating a split between the old world and the new world, which is why it hinted at the Pilgrims, because it occurred 144,000 days after the Pilgrims landed. That is astounding. It's huge. In fact, it's so huge. Think about that. That is the primary purpose of the blood moon tetrad, what I just described. The blood moon tetrad primarily pointed to the eclipse in the middle of it, and nowhere have I encountered the true explanation for the prophetic significance of that eclipse, which is what I just explained. It points to the Pilgrims, which is why it was 144,000 days after the Pilgrims landed. All right, let's move on. Let's see. The expansion of the NHL and Israel came in the 50th year after they were founded, both of them, in November of 2017. All right, 50 years is Jubilee year in the Bible, and that's when restoration happens. Okay, the restoration of Israel. There was a big announcement regarding the timing of the release of Obama's A Promised Land book on the day of the 3 sets of 7 sign in St. Louis on May 7th, 2019, which is exactly 54 months before it is predicted that Harris's plane will crash in St. Louis on November 7th. And once again, November 7th was completely valid, and so is this connection. 11-7 hints at 11 times 7 equals 77, which is hinting at Flight 77 on 9/11. and she is the 49th vice president, which hints at 7 times 7. This chaos in Congress that Gates started with the ouster of McCarthy climaxed on October 24th, 14, in other words, 7 plus 7 days before Harris's predicted crash. And Gates is known for blocking McCarthy's election as Speaker last January by voting against McCarthy 14 times before voting present instead of against McCarthy, which finally ended that whole chaos back in January. The signs on October 17th, 2023 hinted at adding 7 days to get October 24th, but they also hinted at 3 sets of 7 days to get November 7th. Again, Harris visited the university with 7 academic colleges, and she is the 49th vice president. I explained this in part 1 of this video, the Gaza explosion video. 49 is 7 times 7. The Israelites marched for 7 days and then enacted a 7 times 7, 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. 7 days after she visited 7 academic colleges, Trump sounded with his criticism of the 3rd nominee for Speaker, which is in itself a symbolic 3 sets of 7. This hint, because the Hebrews blew trumpets in their 3 sets of 7. This hints at the 7 days and then 7 plus 7 days to November 7th. The airplanes in Harris County, Houston, clipped each other 7 days after Harris flew her plane to 7 academic colleges, and Hobby Airport in Houston is 7 miles from downtown Houston. On October 24th, it was reported that 700 Palestinians had died in the last 24 hours. The agency in Gaza confirmed that these 700 deaths made it the deadliest 24-hour period in the current war. The war began when Israel suffered its deadliest 24-hour period with 1,400 deaths, which is 7 plus 700 deaths. The 700 deaths confirms the 7 days from the Gaza hospital explosion, and 1,400, which is 700 plus 700, confirms the 14, which is 7 plus 7, days from October 24th to Harris's predicted engine explosion on November 7th. And again, that was a step in the trail of signs. The signs on this date confirmed this, as I'll explain in a minute, which will lead to the 48th president, who will make a peace deal with Israel. This is why on October 24th, there were 2 different reports regarding Hamas divers attempting to enter Israel. One report said it was 4 Hamas divers that were killed, and another report said it was 8 Hamas divers, which hints at 48. The 48th president. Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, symbolism for Joshua, who led the Israelites, 3 sets of 7, also said publicly that they hit Gaza the hardest so far on October 24th. He said this on October 24th. So he confirmed the agency inside Gaza that was saying that it was its deadliest day with 700 deaths. Netanyahu said the same thing. And he is symbolism for 3 sets of 7 and Joshua. And so that's all confirmation for October 24th being 7 days after the signs on October 17th and the explosion and Harris visiting 7 academic colleges, etc. And confirmation for the 7 plus 7 days to November 7th. On October 17th, the day of the Gaza hospital explosion sign, the trailer for the movie The Zone of Interest, hints at Gaza, about the Holocaust was released. 7 days later, on October 24th, the trailer for the Steve McQueen documentary movie Occupied City, this is not the old Steve McQueen, but some new director or something, which hints at Gaza, was released. And it was released by the same company, which is also about the Jews in Nazi-occupied Netherlands and the Holocaust, and how it hints at and parallels with our current time. The movie overlays images of CVD restrictions, protests, with narrated facts about 1942 Amsterdam. Because, of course, it's the same thing happening again, but in a new form. The new Holocaust, the new genocide, the new Nazism, the civil war between the blue team, by the blue team, I should say, and their restrictions, just like the restrictions of the Jews in the Netherlands in 1942, including restrictions being able to go to a movie. Speaking of movies, both movies are produced by the entertainment company A24, which hints at 2024. Both trailer releases are timed with prophetic signs in Gaza 7 days apart. Okay? You follow that? Both of these trailers about the Holocaust are timed with these two signs in Gaza that are 7 days apart. Gaza signs that are 7 days apart and overlap signs that regard Harris's predicted plane crash that are also 7 days apart. Harris just turned 59 years old. On October 24th, there was a sign involving Flight 2059. October 24th is 59 days before the predicted fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 17 on December 22nd, 2023, when it is predicted that Israel will nuke Damascus. 59 is the 17th prime number. The signs on October 17th and October 24th in Gaza regard rocket explosions. Just like how it is predicted that the fulfillment of Isaiah 17 will be the nuking explosion of Damascus, which confirms the predicted nuclear explosion in Damascus on December 22nd. God pairs 17 and 9 to confirm the connections. The 17th prime number connection from October 24th is preceded by exactly 90 days, which is the equivalent of 2,160 hours, which is 6 times 6 times 60 hours, which hints at 666, the number of the Antichrist, after the fox on the Temple Mount on the 9th of Av in the Hebrew calendar. October 24th is also exactly 900 days, which is 21,600 hours, another 666 hint, after the first night of clashes on the Temple Mount that began the mini war on May 7th, 2021. On May 7th, 2021, the two teams from the 17th state baseball teams played each other, and the Cincinnati Reds pitched the fourth no-hitter of the season, which was the same day that the helicopter on Mars flew its fifth flight and first one-way flight, which hinted at 54, the 54th Regiment, the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, and programmable currency used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which is why the pitcher on the pitching mound, which symbolizes the Antichrist on the Temple Mount in Bible prophecy, was player number 22, because the number 22 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. And the story was how his son had put a good luck, Incredible Hulk tattoo on his arm that day, which symbolizes the changed chromosomes that the mark of the Antichrist thing does. And you know what I'm talking about. The thing that you can't talk about is the mark of the Antichrist. Case closed when this prediction comes to pass. And this is the purpose of the prediction that is from God. Make no mistake. It isn't a precursor, a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. It is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It does not need an additional something, such as additional technology or additional false religious worship or a new supposed dispensation age after all Christians are raptured. All right. This 900 days connection to May 7th, 2021, is preceded by exactly 8 plus 8 plus 8 months. The name Jesus in Greek gematria equals 888. And 8 plus 8 plus 8 months hints at 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 months. And the 3 sets of 7 sign in St. Louis on May 7th, 2019, which I explained a minute ago. On October 23rd, 2023, there was a car pileup in Louisiana caused by a rare incident of super fog. Fog mixed with forest fire smoke. It was initially reported that there were over 150 cars piled up on the I-55. This hints at Harris's predicted crash 15 days after this near the I-55 in St. Louis. Even the I-55 hints at 15, as the I hints at 1. The next day, the representative from Louisiana became the 4th nominee for Speaker. 4 plus 4 people died in the pileup. Louisiana is the 18th state, which hints at 6 plus 6 plus 6, the number of the Antichrist. The representative's initials, MJ, equal 23, which pairs with the 4 plus 4 deaths. And his name, Mike, short for Michael, hints at Michelle. Michelle Obama will replace Harris. 23 minus 8 deaths equals 15 from the car pileup. Also on October 24th, 42 states sued Meta, Facebook, which hints at censorship of speech by the Antichrist, 42 months in Bible prophecy. The number 42 symbolizes the Antichrist and Antichrist system and enforcement of the mark of the Antichrist through the smartphone and internet. Okay, so we have this very prophetic date, this super date for signs. One of the signs is the 42 states. That's prophetic because of the number 42. It's suing Meta, which is symbolic of, and why they're suing, which hints at the censorship of speech. You know what, and so anyway, yes. And the mark of the Antichrist will be enforced through the smartphone and the internet. That's why in Bible prophecy, in Revelation chapter 13, the image of the beast, which is the smartphone and the internet, speaks an unutterable language. It speaks an ununderstandable language, which is what John wrote. It's computer language, in other words. All of this confirms the analysis that pointed to October 24th, 2023, including 7 days from October 17th. 4 times 44 months from February 24th, 2009, and Obama's commendation of Captain Sully, and 42 months from Harrison Ford's aviation mishap on April 24th, 2020, followed exactly 5 months later with his clearance by the FAA, which was exactly 37 months before October 24th. Okay. So, yeah, Captain Sully is a part of this, and Obama commended him at his first State of the Union speech. And Captain Sully crashed his plane in the Hudson River. It was a 9/11 sign. It was near Lower Manhattan. And let me see. Yeah, on and on. And God uses first in his signs. And Captain Sully, his plane crashed due to a bird strike, which is how it is predicted Kamala Harris's plane will crash due to a bird strike. The signs on October 17th revealed adding 3 sets of 7 days to reach November 7th. The prophetic significance of the university she visited was explained in the October 17th email and was read in the part 1 of this video. The 49th 7x7 vice president visited 7 academic colleges. 3 sets of 7 that parallels Joshua. The signs 7 days later on October 24th further confirmed this 7 and 7x7 symbolism. The signs on October 24th included the 700 deaths, the deadliest day for the Gazans, which was the result of 7 plus 700 deaths, Israel's deadliest day. As well, the 2 planes clipped their wings 7 miles from downtown Houston in Harris County. One of the signs on October 17th was the release of the trailer for Zone of Interest about Jews and the Holocaust. This was followed 7 days later with the release of by the same company of the trailer for Occupied City. also about the Jews and the Holocaust. At the end of this 3 sets of 7 days, Joshua symbolism, on November 7th, the main story of the day was that the leader of Israel, Joshua symbolism, Netanyahu, shouted, in other words, trumpeted, which is what they did in Joshua, in the book of Joshua, before the walls collapsed, they shouted and blew trumpets. So the leader of Israel shouted, in other words, symbolically shouted, trumpeted, that the IDF had surrounded Gaza City and was now deep inside Gaza City. Netanyahu announced they had taken Gaza City. They had crossed over the perimeter around the city and were in the city. This is taking of the city of Jericho symbolism. And it came precisely at the end of the 3 sets of 7, as it did in the book of Joshua. Gaza City is now occupied, hence the connection to the movie Occupied City. Okay, that's amazing. Joshua died at 110. The I-10 highway hints at 110 because the I hints at the number 1. On November 7th, at the end of the symbolic 3 sets of 7 days, and Joshua led them in the 3 sets of 7 in the book of Joshua. So at the end of the 3 sets of 7 here on November 7th, a second super fog event occurred. A second car pileup that resulted in 1 death. The first car pileup resulted in 7 deaths. It is currently being reported as 7 deaths. Okay, so on the day of the car pileup, the first one, it was reported 7 deaths. Then we got some reports the next day about an additional death. But they're back to reporting 7 deaths. And so we're just going to go with that as the symbolic significance here, because if God wanted an 8 in there, he would have put it. And so who knows how the 8th person died or if it was in fact true, but whatever. It's 7 deaths. And this is in the 3 sets of 7 symbolism signs here. Joshua, who died at 110, led the Israelites in a symbolic 3 sets of 7. This 1 death in the second super fog car crash pileup in Louisiana hinted at the death of Harris in a plane crash in St. Louis. Louisiana hints at St. Louis. Louisiana is the 18th state, which hints at 6 plus 6 plus 6, the number of the Antichrist. The second car pileup hints at the second presidency for the Antichrist after the death of Harris in a plane crash. In English gematria, Louisiana is 690, which is a hint at Daniel chapter 9, the most central prophecy in the Bible, and the 70th 7 that follows the 69 weeks. The period of the Antichrist in the end times. That's why God uses 690, which is why the first car pileup had 7 deaths. It hinted at the 70th 7. It hinted at, because Louisiana hints at 690. It hinted at the 70th 7 period of the Antichrist. In Hebrew gematria, Louisiana is 460, which is 2 times 230, which hints at 223, and hints at 2023. And 223 is the 48th prime number, which hints at the 48th president Antichrist. Super fog is symbolism for not being able to see what is right in front of you, not being able to see what is in the immediate future, not being able to see that Barack Obama is about to return to the White House in the immediate future after the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. On November 7th, Harris was in the news for having had a conversation with the president of Israel, which is Joshua leader symbolism, on this day, on November 7th. President Isaac Herzog is simple English gematria for 222. This confirms that her crash in St. Louis will be exactly 22 years and 2 months after 9/11, and the events on 9/11 pointed to George Washington, who was born on the date 222. There were plane crashes on 9/11, including Flight 77, which hints at 11 times 7 and the date 11/7. And the eclipse over St. Louis that passed over St. Louis at 1:17 p.m. 11/11, November 11th this year, is also 2 plus 2 days after Harris spoke with the leader of Israel, which is Joshua symbolism, whose name equals 222. And November 11th, like I'm saying here, will be 22 years and 2 months after 9/11. Also on November 7th, it was announced, trumpeted, that Harris would be visiting Boston on November 9th, which hints at 9/11. In the middle of this 2 plus 2 days connection from November 7th to November 11th. It was from Boston that 2 planes departed that crashed into the 2 towers on 9/11. Hence the 2 plus 2 days connection on either side of this 11/9 date. That's upcoming. That's today. The planes departed from Governor's Island, which is now Logan Airport, where John Winthrop lived and prayed. Winthrop led the 11 ship flotilla, which is why it was Flight 11 from Governor's Island on 9/11 that had a crew of 11 that hit the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11. It took 66, as in the 11th triangular number, days for the 101, which hints at 11, passengers to arrive on the Mayflower on the date 11/11 in the Julian calendar. Harris will be in Boston on 11/9, which hints at 9/11, 101 days after she was last in Boston for the NAACP conference. 11/11 will also be exactly 48, as in the 48th president, months after the huge fireball flew over the Gateway Arch in St. Louis on the 101 anniversary of the end of World War I at 11 a.m. on the date 11/11 in 1918. The day the Dow closed, on this same day, the Dow closed unchanged to within 6 decimal places. The first time it closed unchanged after the decimalization of the Dow was 101 days after 9/11. Also on November 7th, Harris tweeted about her visit to the UK and the summit on artificial intelligence with a production video of the trip and event. This confirms the analysis regarding the connection from the new Beatles song and George Harrison. So watch the Beatles video to know what I'm talking about there. All right. In this video, I just finished explaining the signs regarding November 7th. Hopefully it was clear in my explanation, because I can't recall exactly what I wrote or have explained so far. But hopefully it was clear that the signs on November 7th were Joshua symbolism signs, and that is why it was 3 sets of 7 days after October 17th, the big date. And this is why we add 3 sets of 7 days to November 7th. In other words, 2 sets of 3 sets of 7 days from October 17th to reach the date November 28th, which was known ahead of time because of this. It was clear for other reasons as well, but it was clear before November 28th that God would be using it as a step in the trail of signs because of it being 3 sets of 7 days after the Joshua symbolism signs that occurred on November 7th. And so what I'm going to do now is read the emails that I wrote to friends explaining this information regarding the prophetic signs that ended up occurring on November 28th. It is very interesting. And then I will explain after this the signs that occurred on November 7th and how the signs on November 28th pointed to January 7th, and how the signs on November 28th pointed to January 7th. All right. I believe it is now known why God was pointing to 11/28, November 28th, and how it relates to Harris's predicted crash. The death of First Lady Rosalind Carter is a sign pointing to First Lady Michelle Obama. November 19th hints at 9/11. As was explained in the other email, on 11/19, the sign was the Lions-Bears football game that was about 4 turnovers and the bizarre ending of 11 and 12 men on the field. That's a typo. It was the 4 turnovers and the comeback in the fourth quarter by the quarterback, the Lions quarterback, that threw the 4 turnovers, hinting at the turning over in the White House and the 44th president, hence the 4 turnovers and the fourth quarter comeback. And you could even arguably say that there will be 4 turnovers. Kamala Harris will die. Michelle Obama will replace her. Joe Biden will step down. She will replace Joe Biden. She will appoint Barack Obama, and then she will step down, and Barack Obama will replace her as the president. So 4 turnovers. Okay, so anyway, this 11 of 12 men, that's a different football sign that occurred just a few days prior on November 13th. I got it mixed up right here in this paragraph. Okay, so which hinted at the turning over in the White House, which I just mentioned. Okay, Rosalind Carter died on 11/19. Okay, that's the connection here. She died on 11/19, and her funeral was on November 28th, as I will be getting to. Her name in Hebrew gematria, which if you don't know what that is, Roman, Greek, and Hebrew letters are also numbers, and as such, names and words can be converted into a numeric value. And the name of Rosalind Carter is the equivalent of 990, which so 990 equals 9 times 110. And God pairs 9 and 110 to confirm his signs. As has been explained before, it hints at 9/11. All right, so I've explained it too many times to play the clip. If I were to play the clip, it would be another 7-8 minutes just to explain that. Hopefully you've watched that in another video already. So 910 is also the 44th triangular number. All right, so she died. Her name equals 990, which is the 44th triangular number. And she died on this date that God was pointing to ahead of time, and the prophetic sign on this date was the 4 turnovers and the 4th quarter comeback by the Lions. By the way, it was against the Chicago Bears, and God uses Chicago for symbolism for the 44th president, who is from Chicago. The reason for the Lions is because Jesus is descendant from the tribe of Judah, which is symbolized by the lion. This is Bible prophecy. And the Lord will come down and defend his holy mountain like a lion, as described in Isaiah chapter 31. Okay, so let's move on. So you get the idea here. Rosalind Carter died on the day her name is the equivalent of the 44th triangular number, and she died on the prophetic day of the 4 turnovers and the 4th quarter comeback. All right. Her funeral, which Kamala Harris flew to in her plane to attend, which gives us a Kamala Harris Air Force 2 plane prophetic sign, was in the 4th state. Rosalind Carter, 990, died 9 days before her prophetic funeral in the 4th state. There were 4 other former First Ladies in attendance at the funeral in the 4th state. Okay, so another 4 and 4, and again, her name is the equivalent of the 44th triangular number. A key aspect of the news story were the other First Ladies in attendance, right? One of the main aspects of the news story regarding her funeral was the attendance of the other former First Ladies, which there were 4 of, and this was in the 4th state. This main story regarding the 4 former First Ladies included a story about Melania Trump. Trump was not in attendance, thus highlighting further the significance of Melania Trump, the former First Lady. Okay, and this aspect of the story regarded how she stood out because her coat was gray and not black, like the other former First Ladies, which made this a Trumpette. That should say, well, Trumper sign, same thing, I suppose. Trump is God's trumpet that he is using to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs. Trumpers are trumpeters, trumpeting the corruption in the government, etc. So this is the symbolism in modern day events that point to the book of Joshua. In other words, 4 former first ladies in the 4th state hints at 44, and Rosalind Carter in Hebrew gematria is the 44th triangular number. This 9 days pairs with 44 to confirm the signs and connections. And again, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And when we think about it, one simple way in which he would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9 and 44. And I know the numbers God pairs together to confirm his signs and connections because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night, more than full-time hours for 6 years. And the main reason why God pairs 9 and 44 is he is identifying the Antichrist, the 44th president, who became the president in 2009. Also, from the Bible, the number 9 is the most important number, or rather, in his big picture of signs, the most important number is 9, as from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. And the Antichrist is the vehicle of God's judgment, the 44th president. All right. It also, so, as I was saying, 4 former first ladies in the 4th state and Rosalind Carter's name equaling the 44th triangular number also points to the first lady of the 44th president, Michelle Obama, who was further highlighted in this sign and the news stories because she attended without Barack, the 44th president. She was also in the news for having flown to the funeral with Biden on his Air Force plane, which hints at the crash of Harris's Air Force plane that will enable her to replace Biden and become the president again. Okay, so the story regarding Michelle Obama's attendance at this funeral regarded her hitchhiking a ride with Joe Biden on his Air Force plane, and because of the context of this being in the trail of signs leading to the death of Kamala Harris, this was another hint at the Air Force plane of Kamala Harris and the coming crash. All right. Which, by the way, will lead to Michelle Obama replacing her. That is the point. 4 first ladies attended 4 former first ladies attended the funeral in the 4th state for the first lady whose name equals the 44th triangular number, because 1128 is 40 days, which hints at 4, before Harris's crash in her Air Force plane. The state that I am referring to is January 7th, and it was known ahead of time, although not at the time of this writing, that January 7th would be a step in the trail of signs leading to Harris's predicted death in a plane crash on February 3rd, which will be 9 + 9 + 9 days after January 7th. All right. This 40 days is also 1 month and 10 days, which hints at 110. And that pairs with the 9 + 9 + 9 days that follows this, right? Because again, it is 40 days to January 7th, which is 1 month and 10 days, which hints at 110. And then from January 7th, it is 9 + 9 + 9 days to February 3rd. And speaking of pairing numbers together that confirm the signs and connections, February 3rd, 2-3 hints at 23, and God pairs 9 and 23 together to confirm his signs, patterns, and connections. The basketball president wore jersey number 23 in high school and became president in 2009. To confirm his signs and connections, God pairs 110. As I explained, this 1 month and 10 days, which hints at 110 connection between 11:28 and 1:7, is preceded by 9 days to November 11:19. Also, part of the news story, which makes it another pairing of 9 and 110, by the way, right? Because this 9 days is followed by 1 month and 10 days, which hints at 110. Therefore, this is a pairing of 9 and 110. Also, part of the news story on 11/28 is how the funeral, the date of the funeral, is how Jimmy Carter recently turned 99. And he spoke at the funeral. In other words, the news covered or reported about how he spoke at the funeral, came out of his hospice to speak at the funeral, and the news reported his age, which is 99, which made it exceptional that he did that. In other words, it was another confirmation. This 99 in Carter's age also pairs with the 1 month and 10 days connection that follows these signs on November 28th. Okay? Part of the news story on 11/28 is Jimmy Carter's farewell words to his wife of 77 years. This hints at Flight 77 on 9/11, which is why Rosalind Carter died on 11/19. Okay, so a big part of the news story was the 77 years that they were married. And I'll explain now why, but it points to 9/11, which is why Rosalind Carter died on the date 11/19, because it hints at 9/11, and why their marriage was for 77 years. Okay? Harris's predicted flight path on February 3rd will mirror Flight 77 on 9/11. All right? So her flight path, which will either be from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., or Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, is the same flight path of Flight 77 before it was hijacked and then rammed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Furthermore, she will crash where the eclipse peaked in St. Louis at 1:17 p.m. And 77 hints at 11 times 7, which hints at 1:17 p.m. As well, 77 hints at 7 times 7, and Harris is the 49th vice president, which hints at 7 times 7 and 77. It should be pointed out that there were 4 former First Ladies in the 4th state for the funeral of the former First Lady. The current First Lady is also illegitimate, as her husband shoplifted the referendum and took the house that is in the color of white when he was 77 years old, which is another reason why the marriage of the Carters was for 77 years. Another way to look at this is that there were 4 First Ladies in black, while Trumpet's wife was not. The symbolism of the color black being I won't go there, because yeah, I won't go there. But you know what? I don't even know why I wrote that. I forget why I wrote that. I already mentioned how Melania Trump stood out, and that was the point. It's pointing to Trump. It's a trumpet sign, in other words. Also, the New York Post article that is linked to in this email thread mentions in its headline that Michelle Obama caught a ride to the funeral with the Clintons on Biden's Air Force plane. The reason for this is that Hillary is a former first lady that had ambitions for the presidency. The article is about whether or not Michelle has ambitions for the presidency. Her political party has ambitions for her for the presidency. Okay, so let me read that again. The article is about whether or not, okay, I should rephrase this. Regardless of whether or not Michelle Obama has ambitions for the presidency, her political party has ambitions for her for the presidency. The article also quotes Michelle essentially saying in 2020 that the nation faced unexistential threat with the control of the presidency. Quote, "If you think things cannot get possibly worse, trust me, they can. And they will if we don't make a change in the election," unquote. The former First Lady said, wearing a gold vote necklace. Quote, "If we have any hope of ending this chaos, we have to vote for Joe Biden like our lives depend on it," unquote. Conservatives often make a mistake in thinking that progressives like Michelle don't really mean what they say, that what they say is irrational, because they are, and therefore must be hyperbole. However, assuming that Michelle sincerely believes that Trump and conservatives are an existential threat, I don't understand my own sentence, I apologize. However, assuming that Michelle sincerely believes that Trump and conservatives are an existential threat, she would make a sacrifice and take the presidency if she doesn't want the job, as she claims. Okay, so there you go. I mean, she claims to not want the job, but there's an existential threat. So theoretically, if that were true, if she believes that, she would make the sacrifice. In other words, it's strategically planned when she says she doesn't want the job, because she's going to take the job, and she'll use the excuse of the existential threat. The reason for pointing this out is not that there is any doubt that she will become the 47th president, because this is what God is communicating. She will be the 47th president after Kamala Harris dies in a plane crash. That is more than clear enough. That is more than clear through God's signs. The point is that this is the news story on 11/28, when 4 former First Ladies traveled to the 4th state, and that, like former First Lady Hillary Clinton, Michelle has or will have ambition for the presidency. Okay, so long story short here, this is the sign with the fact that she hitched a ride with Hillary Clinton, and this news story regarding all of this and her ambition for the White House, or the party's ambition for her, is all related because Clinton, who is a former first lady, because this is unusual in history, right? Usually former first ladies don't try to become the president. That trend changed with Hillary Clinton. So, in other words, Hillary Clinton is the prototype, if you will, the precedent for a former first lady Democrat to become the president. A Republican former first lady wouldn't think of this, but Democrats would. And so that is the connection here, because Hillary Clinton was this unusual precedent in history where after her husband left the White House, she sought the White House, and the two got together on this plane ride, which was all about former first ladies. In other words, and it was on Biden's Air Force plane, and therefore this is a hint at how Michelle Obama, a former first lady, after her husband left the White House, will seek the White House. And this will be achieved through an Air Force Two plane with Kamala Harris inside and her death. Okay, so hopefully that's clear now. Michelle Obama was born in Chicago and lived her life in Chicago before moving to Washington. She lives in the residence of the 28th president, Woodrow Wilson. Barack is a Woodrow Wilson. This sign regarding Michelle occurred on the 28th of the month. Okay, that's just an aside note. Michelle will become the president after Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash. Harris's death in a plane crash will point to Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4, which speaks of lions and the Lord coming down to fight for his mountain. 9 days before 99-year-old Carter spoke to 4 former first ladies in the 4th state was the day the first lady, whose name equals the 44th triangular number, died on the same day that the Lions scored 31 points and won the game, even though their quarterback threw 4 turnovers. That's astounding, actually. I forgot that. So the score, because that was the dramatic comeback in the 4th quarter, right? And they ended up scoring the 31 points, but it was all about the number 4 because of the 4 turnovers and the 4th quarter comeback. That's a clear hint at the Lions in Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4, which, by the way, I previously mentioned, even though I had forgotten this point. Also, another thing, too, is the quarterback who was used by God previously in Super Bowl 53. His number is 16, which hints at 4 times 4 and the 44th president. These 31 points were scored against Chicago, which is symbolism for Michelle and Barack. And the 4 turnovers from the Lions were interceptions caught by Chicago players, which also hints at Michelle and Barack and their turning over of the White House, their interception, if you will. Interceptions are balls intercepted in the air. The Lord will intercept Harris's plane in the air, which actually is Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4, because it speaks of the roaring of the lion, or rather a lion's roar, and it is believed that her plane will be brought down by turbulence, which will symbolize this. Okay, and it will cause a turnover in the White House. Harris's plane will fall from the sky over St. Louis, which has the area code 314, which hints at Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4. And again, she will be brought down by turbulence, which is Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4. Isaiah 31 begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt. Harris's plane will crash near Little Egypt." That is the symbolism in St. Louis also. It is near where the eclipse peaked in 2017 over the area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt because of the Bible and the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, being a type, a foreshadow of the Antichrist. All right. The day that Lions quarterback number 16, which hints at 4 times 4 and 44 and the 44th president, played in the Super Bowl for LA, Los Angeles, which hints at, by the way, fallen angels, which is what will be symbolized with Kamala Harris falling from the sky in her plane. Okay, so this quarterback, on the day that he played in the Super Bowl, was the day of a prophetic plane crash in Los Angeles. 4 people died in the crash in a residential neighborhood in Yorba Linda. Actually, that's not correct. It was 5 people that died. I wonder, though, if it was 1 pilot and 4 people inside the home, because the people in the home were there for a Super Bowl party. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. California Senator Kamala Harris tweeted her condolences. That's the thing that really does matter, though, because she was the senator from California at the time, and therefore she is connected to this plane crash. Yorba Linda is home to the Richard Nixon Presidential Library. Nixon was the only president to have used the 25th Amendment when he replaced his vice president with Gerald Ford. Likewise, Michelle and Barack will become presidents through the use of the 25th Amendment after a plane crash and the replacement of a vice president. This Boston-LA Super Bowl, in which Brady went into with 17 Super Bowl records, it also was his 9th Super Bowl out of the 11 Super Bowls the Patriots had been in, was 17 years after Boston played the same team, the Rams, which at that time played in St. Louis, played for St. Louis. But in 2019, 17 years later, they played for LA. It was Brady's first Super Bowl, exactly 17 years earlier, on the date 2-3, by the way, February 3rd, 2002. The 17 years later Super Bowl was February 3rd, 2019. Okay, so it was Brady's first Super Bowl, and it was known for its last-minute winning drive from the 17-yard line, the Patriots' 17-yard line, with the score tied at 17-17. This Super Bowl was just months after two planes rammed, as in the football team Rams, into the Twin Towers 17 minutes apart, hence the last-minute winning drive from the 17-yard line, with the score tied at 17-17. Because it was two planes that struck the two towers, 17-17 in other words, 17 minutes apart. The two Super Bowls between Boston and Los Angeles Rams hinted at the two planes on 9/11 that were flights from Boston to Los Angeles. In the 2002 Super Bowl, the Rams played for the city of St. Louis before moving to LA. This is because the follow-up judgment and plane crash that will occur, and I mean the follow-up judgment to the warning of judgment that was the 9/11 events that involved plane crashes, the follow-up will be a plane crash that will occur on the date 1/7, okay? And it will be in St. Louis, and will be a flight that will depart either for LA or from LA. All right. Now, that's why 1/7, one reason why 1/7 was a step in the trail of signs, it is because it hints at the number 17 and the two planes that struck the two towers 17 minutes apart. Okay? But as we now know, it was a step in the trail of signs. Okay? It was overlooked, perhaps, the most important connection confirmation. The four-party talk and four corners talk, which hinted at Zechariah chapter 1, as was explained in part 1 of this video. This sign involving the four-party talk that was canceled as Joe Biden boarded his plane, and the day that Harris boarded her plane for her talk in the Four Corners region, these signs were on October 17th, which was 2 times 3 sets of 7 days before four former first ladies in the 4th state. So there you go, which is 40 days before Harris's crash, but it isn't her crash. It was a step in the trail, okay? 40 days to January 7th. But you get my point here, is that, I had been talking about this connection between October 17th and November 28th, and how it was 3 sets of 7 days. Well, on the November 28th, the sign was the 4 former first ladies in the 4th state. And the sign that was 3 sets of 7 days earlier was the 4-party talk and the 4 corners talk. Okay? That's the astounding confirmation there. All right, now in this video, I will briefly explain the prophetic signs that occurred on January 7th, the date that we expected ahead of time to be a step in the trail. Again, I want to emphasize that January 7th didn't come and go before realizing that it was a step. It was realized that it would only be a step in the trail of signs prior. It was realized prior to January 7th that it would only be a step. Okay, so on January 7th, we expected a prophetic sign related to Harris's predicted plane crash on February 3rd. At the time of the recent Alaska Airlines incident, I was busy with Manhattan bomb videos and I didn't look deeply into it, mostly because it occurred on January 5th and I didn't know how it fit into the big picture of signs at first. January 5th is 29 days. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Alaska Airlines flight, which by the way, Alaska is the 49th state, and Kamala Harris is the 49th vice president, and she will die in a plane crash, as God is revealing. And so this Alaska Airlines incident in which the door plug fell off of the plane into a residential neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, was thought to be somehow a prophetic sign, but I couldn't figure it out. And I was too busy to figure it out at the time because January 5th was a mystery as to how that would fit. But let's continue here. January 5th is 29 days to February 3rd. Is this relevant? The date is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. The incident occurred near where the Great American Eclipse entered the nation on the Oregon coast. The 2017 eclipse entered the U.S. Its path of okay, so I'm jumping ahead actually, so let's just continue. Harris's flight path across the nation will point to the path of the eclipse. Okay. So God is using the path of the eclipse in his signs. The 2017 Great American Eclipse is a massive, extremely important prophetic sign. It is in the league of 9/11, actually. Okay? And this is also what Harris's flight path across the country will hint at. It will be pointing to the Great American Eclipse, warning of judgment in 2017 that was a symbolic beginning of the final set of 7 years described in Daniel chapter 9. And there are probably most of you listening to this will be raising who know some things about Bible prophecy, will be raising their eyebrows. What is he talking about? Well, there were many symbolic beginnings to this final set of 7 years that were demonstrated by God's signs in 2017. The thing is, most of you are not watchers. Jesus commanded to watch for his signs. Even many people think that they are watchers, but they're not really watching. They're not. They're looking for secret codes supposedly in the Bible, or are only paying attention to the very relatively infrequent signs in the night sky, which actually cannot be properly understood without their context to the other signs, the vast majority of which are not in the night sky. Anyway, the point is, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction that is from God is to prove that the second coming is in 2024. When the prediction comes to pass, case closed. End of debate. Finished. You didn't get it, but I'm telling you that because you weren't watching, the signs clearly indicated in 2017 a beginning to the final set of 7 years. Okay? Anyway, the point is simply that that's the purpose of the prediction. I just want to make that clear, because to not appreciate that is to miss entirely the point of this video and this prediction. And as I like to say, you might as well turn off the video now and do something else with your time. Do what you will with this information before the prediction, but afterwards, make sure you understand that, believe me, I know far better than you why God is using this prediction. Right? And that makes sense too, right? The person that's relaying the prediction, who has spent years learning about what God is doing, would know better than the person listening to this for the first time how and why the purpose of the prediction. Okay? It is to prove that the second coming is on the Day of Atonement, October 12th, 2024. And the most quoted passage in the Bible, Matthew 24:36, no one knows the day. The mainstream interpretation of that is incorrect. And that is also proven through this prediction. But that shouldn't be necessary, because it clearly contradicts the interpretation of it clearly contradicts many other passages in the Bible. And you should know that, in my opinion. All right, so let's return to what I was saying here. Harris's flight path will be pointing to the Great American Eclipse, a symbolic beginning of the final 7 years. Eclipses are when the moon passes in front of the sun. The moon cycle is 29 days. The Alaska Airlines incident was about its door and where it fell, which therefore emphasizes its geographical location. In other words, the story about this Alaska Airlines incident is the location of where the door fell. It's all about the door, and for a couple of days, the mystery as to where the door landed. But through this, God was pointing to, like, if you will, an X marks the spot. He was pointing to a location. And why? Because this is near the Oregon coast where the eclipse entered the U.S. That's why it's a plane. Alaska Airlines is because Kamala Harris's plane crash, or rather her flight across the country, once again will be pointing to the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse that first entered near Portland on the Oregon coast. And so moons are involved in eclipses. And the moon cycle is 29 days, and that's why this 29 days is relevant. It's very simple, actually, straightforward. Hopefully I explained it well enough. The Alaska Airlines incident was about its door and where it fell, okay, which emphasizes its geographical location, which hints at the eclipse's path, and the eclipse involves the moon. Therefore, this 29 days connection is relevant. Additionally, there were 177 people on board the plane, and 177 days is the number of days in between blood moon eclipses in a tetrad. It's a big number associated with the moon, in other words. 177 is also 59 plus 59 plus 59, and God frequently repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And Harris is she's 59 years old. There's more to the significance of 59. It's furthermore the 17th prime number. And as I'm explaining, this sign is related to the date 17, which hints at 17, actually. However, we were looking for a sign on 17, which again hits at 17, and the 17th prime number is 59. So we were looking for a sign on 17, not 15. This is why the door was discovered and reported to the NTSB, which God frequently uses in his signs, by the way. God uses NTSB signs for prophetic signs on dates, etc. Okay, so the door was discovered and reported to the NTSB on the date we were looking for, January 7th. And again, this prophetic sign is all about the door. It was discovered in Cedar Hills, which hints at high place, which in Hebrew is Bama, which, as I've explained before, countless times, I'll just do it another time, I guess. Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven, which is what Jesus said in Luke 10:18. He said that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. Barak in Hebrew means lightning. Bama means high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven, as, for example, it is said that Lucifer fell from the high place. And in the language Jesus would have spoken, Aramaic, the word for from is O. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And by the way, another point, or another reason, another purpose for this prediction from God, this prediction for Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash, is to do away with the false interpretation of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, which tells Christians supposedly that the identity of the Antichrist cannot possibly be known until some supposed event, such as like the Antichrist stepping on to the Temple Mount or something to that effect. We're not really even clear what they're thinking. They just know that the identity of the Antichrist cannot be known, which is false, completely 100%. Furthermore, with the passage 2 Thessalonians 2, Paul was identifying the Antichrist because the he and the what that he was referring to that was holding back the Antichrist, he spoke cryptically because he was referring to Rome and Caesar. Once they were out of the way, when he moved the capital to Istanbul or Constantinople, that allowed the bishops of Rome to rise in power. And the reason why he spoke cryptically, which he never otherwise did, is because he knew that those in possession of his letter would be in danger if he had spoken plainly. And he even said to them, you know what I'm talking about. Okay? So, in other words, when he was saying to the Thessalonians, he was saying to them, look, the Antichrist cannot have come yet because Rome and Caesar are not out of the way, which will allow the bishops of Rome to rise in power. Because the papacy is blasphemy and Catholicism God absolutely hates. That's the truth. And we need to stop beating around the bush regarding this truth. God doesn't hate Catholics, okay? We don't need to keep apologizing about this fact that Catholicism is wicked deception from Satan. God hates, the thing that God hates the most is false religious worship. And that's what Catholicism is. It's paganism wrapped in a wrapper that makes it appear to be like Christianity, but it isn't. It's the wolf in sheep's clothing and has been since the beginning, which is why it has been since the beginning inevitable that the Antichrist would be a pope, a bishop of Rome. All right. So anyway, so what was I saying here? So Cedar Hills. Okay, so that's just the symbolism, and why the door was found in Cedar Hills is because of this symbolism connected to Barack Obama, who will rise to power through the fall from a high place, Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash, which is why the door fell from a high place into Cedar Hills. Okay? So, and Cedar Hills is near Highway 217. And that's a 9/11 number because of the two planes that struck the two towers 17 minutes apart. But it also hints at Genesis 7 and the beginning of the flood, which began on the 17th day of the second month. U.S. Route 26 also goes past Cedar Hills, and this is mentioned in the news story, actually. And it goes on its way to the coast, which is where the eclipse entered the U.S. The seat next to the door that fell was 26A. So we got two 26s there, which confirms the matter. Yahweh, the name of God in Hebrew, Hebrew gematria, equals 26. The 177 people on board also hinted at the date 17, as I explained earlier. Okay, so here's our sign on the date 17, in other words. On 1/7, Alaska Airlines announced it had grounded 65 of its planes. 65 is the 23rd semi-prime number, which is a number only divisible by prime numbers. God uses this in his signs. And that it was affecting 23,000 passengers. So there's two 23s there. Also on 1/7, United Airlines announced that it had grounded planes and that 230 flights had been canceled. That's another 23. These announcements on 1/7 involving the number 23 are 9 plus 9 plus 9 days to the date 2/3, which hints at 23. United grounded 79 planes, and 79 is the 22nd prime number, and the 24th of Shavat begins at sunset on 2/2, which hints at 22. So there you have it. This sign actually, like was expected, confirms this 9 plus 9 plus 9 days, and confirms that the Harris's crash will be on February 3rd. And again, this was Alaska Airlines, the 49th state. She is the 49th vice president. But anyway, the point is as I mentioned before, God pairs 9 and 23 together. And you know what? What I should do is, well, no, I've played the clip already in this video. No, I probably haven't. So what I'm going to do is play this very important clip because of the significance of this, what's going on here, explaining just a few minutes why and how God pairs 9 and 23 to confirm the signs and connections. It's fascinating, and that will drive home the seriousness of this connection of 9 plus 9 plus 9 days from these signs involving the number 23 on 1/7 to the date 2/3, which hints at 23. God uses the number 23 to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. In the Old Testament in the Bible, it is described how 2 goats were used on the Day of Atonement in the ritual on the Temple Mount. In Bible prophecy, there are 2 antichrists, and in Bible prophecy, it is said that the Antichrist will rule the Temple Mount during the end times period. And the Antichrist will be vanquished from the Temple Mount at the return of Lord Jesus Christ on the Day of Atonement in 2024. Goat is Antichrist symbolism. Goat stands for greatest of all time. And this is why the 2 goats of basketball wore jersey number 23, Michael Jordan and LeBron James. The GOAT of basketball, Michael Jordan, played for Chicago, and the GOAT Antichrist, the basketball president, is from Chicago. LeBron James is famous for being from Cleveland and having played for Cleveland and having won the NBA Finals championship for Cleveland, breaking the supposed Cleveland sports curse, which is Antichrist King symbolism, which is why LeBron James goes by the nickname King James. And this was used to point to the president Grover Cleveland, who was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms, skipping the 23rd presidency, just like the Antichrist will serve non-consecutive terms, having skipped the 45th presidency. In God's true big picture of end times signs, patterns, and connections, the number 9 is the most important number, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment, and the number 23 is the 9th prime number, and the number 45 is the 9th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 9th row is 45. This is why Michael Jordan, in the exact middle of his career, after having won 3 NBA titles and before winning his other 3 NBA titles, retired briefly, and when he returned, wore jersey number 45 for coincidentally 23 games. And it is why Michael Jordan, in his last game as a Chicago Bull, another city God uses to point to the Antichrist, who is also from Chicago, scored 45 points against the team from the 45th state. Like Michael Jordan, LeBron James also played in Cleveland, then famously left Cleveland in much controversy, and then returned again to play a second time in Cleveland in order to win the championship for Cleveland and break the Cleveland sports curse, which symbolizes the Antichrist curse of Barack Obama, when he will return to the White House for his second presidency. In other words, the hiatus in the middle of Michael Jordan's career in Chicago and the hiatus in the middle of LeBron James's career in Cleveland hint at the hiatus of Barack Obama skipping the 45th presidency and returning to the White House for a second presidency. It will be his third term, which is why Michael Jordan won 3 championships and then briefly retired before returning a second time to win 3 more championships. God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together in order to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school and became president in 2009, and will become the president again in 2023. From the Bible, the numbers 9 and 23 both symbolize judgment, and the number 23 is the 9th prime number. The only grandfather-grandson presidents were the 9th and 23rd presidents, William and Benjamin Harrison. The 9th president, William Harrison, died on the calendar date April 4th, 44, which hints at the 44th president. Harrison died exactly 1 month after his inauguration. The name Harrison hints at Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash due to a bird strike and lightning and turbulence in St. Louis. And the Antichrist Barack Obama will rise to power and become president again through her replacement, which is what is hinted at with the only president to serve non-consecutive terms, President Grover Cleveland, who skipped the presidency of Benjamin Harrison. The 23rd president, which is why LeBron James, who played for Cleveland, wore jersey number 23. Michelle Obama will first replace Kamala Harris, and then Barack will replace Michelle. Michelle is the feminine version of Michael, which is the reason for the name Michael in the name Michael Jordan. In the Bible, the Hebrews crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land. Barack Obama's famous autobiography is named A Promised Land. Obama the Antichrist will promise the world a new world order utopia. A goat is Antichrist symbolism. The greatest of all time, the GOAT of basketball, Michael Jordan, wore jersey number 23 and jersey number 9 when he played for the U.S. Olympic Dream Team, a team that beat their opponents by an average of 44 points per game, which hints at the 44th president, GOAT Antichrist, that wore jersey number 23 and became president in 2009. If you have not already watched the Michael Jordan Prophecy video on this channel, the Michael Jordan Prophecy video is an essential video for foundational understanding of how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. Besides revealing the identity of the Antichrist, God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 to reveal what the mark of the Antichrist is. Bible prophecy describes a mark of the Antichrist, which if one takes, they will go to hell, and if one doesn't take it, they won't be able to buy or sell, which means they won't be allowed to buy the rationed food that will be rationed due to the coming food shortages. Ezekiel chapter 9 is the chapter that describes the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist. In other words, the 9th chapter of the book of Ezekiel in the Bible is about the mark of the Antichrist, and the mark of the Antichrist involves changing one's chromosomes. And we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. God pairs 9 and 23 to identify what the mark of the Antichrist is. And speaking of the GOAT of basketball, LeBron James, who wears jersey number 23, he gave his name, LeBron James, to a Nike shoe that is named 23 chromosomes. The pattern on the shoe is unmistakably a pattern that resembles snakeskin, and that is because the mark of the Antichrist is a snake bite. The mark of the Antichrist changes chromosomes through inserting a protruding shaped amino acid chain, and this protruding shaped amino acid chain is synthesized snake poison. In the Bible, the biggest symbol of evil, of Satan, is the serpent. The reason why the shoe is made by Nike and why Michael Jordan is known for his Air Jordan shoe made by Nike is that Nike hints at the Nicolaitan doctrine that the vast majority of Christians have, especially evangelical Christians. This Nicolaitan doctrine of our day that Jesus said he hates in Revelation chapter 2, and that he is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. This explains why many quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist. It is judgment for their doctrine. That said, nowhere in the Bible does it say that one cannot repent after taking the mark of the Antichrist. To learn more about what the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day is, watch the most important video titled 23 Church Signs video. Alright, so now it's clear. For this sign, God required the use of both the dates 1-5 and 1-7 in order to incorporate the eclipse path symbolism along with Harris's plane crash symbolism, which was confusing at first. The other sign on 1-7, the date that was expected in advance, was the death of Der Kaiser, the nickname, which by the way is translated the emperor, and this is the nickname of the goat, greatest of all time. God uses goats in his signs, greatest of all time people, of German soccer. The reason for Germany is because this hints at Barack Obama and his many trips and speeches he has delivered right near the Temple of Pergamum in Berlin. The Temple of Pergamum was excavated from Turkey and brought to Berlin and is in the Pergamum Museum. And it is the spiritual source of the power of the Antichrist, if you will, a symbolism for this. And so that's why he's been, that's why Barack Obama was the first presidential candidate, not even president, and that delivered a foreign policy speech in another country, as if he was campaigning to be president of the world. Like, what is a presidential candidate doing campaigning in another country? It's astounding how people, in my opinion, couldn't see the obviousness of how this is the Antichrist at the time. People will speculate, he might be the Antichrist, but because they don't believe the identity of the Antichrist is knowable. Well, that'll change in a few days. The identity of the Antichrist has been known for many, many years, and the prediction will prove this. Also, it's symbolism for the death camps, which the Antichrist will be. God is communicating that there will be a genocide in America. So that's the end of this video. And by the way, we've come full circle because this video is about the GAZA hospital explosion. And this GAZA sign is symbolism for the coming genocide in America. The people trapped inside Gaza, etc. The people that were trapped at the festival in Israel that were murdered. So anyway, that's the symbolism in this. I'm not saying that by any means that Israel is conducting a genocide. No. But what I'm saying is the symbolism is there. Okay, so there you have it. That's how it all ties together, in fact.